I will not begin with theories. I will begin with something simpler, me stomach. When a man reaches 100 years of age, he learns that the body speaks constantly. Most people ignore it. I learned to listen. For many years in my youth, I believed that strength came from heavy meals, thick cuts of meat, butter melting across hot bread, fried foods that left the plate shining with grease. Those meals felt satisfying in the moment. They filled the stomach quickly, but not long after, something else followed. My digestion would slow like a tired engine. My stomach felt heavy, my chest tight, and a quiet burning crept upward after meals. At first I blamed age, stress, or bad luck, but the pattern repeated itself too often to ignore. Meals rich in saturated fat were the common thread. I did not know the science then. I only knew the sensation. Food sitting in the stomach longer than it should. Hours would pass and the body still felt burdened. The stomach was working harder than necessary. Years later, doctors explained what I had already discovered through experience. When we eat large amounts of saturated fat, digestion becomes slower. The stomach empties more gradually. Bile production increases to break down the fats, and the digestive system must work with greater effort to process the meal. For some people, this leads to familiar discomforts, bloating, indigestion, reflux, and the dull pressure that sits in the abdomen long after eating. I did not remove every fat from my life. That would be unnecessary. But I learned a simple rule that has guided my digestion for decades. When saturated fats dominate the meal, the digestive system pays the price. And the body, if you listen carefully, always tells the truth. By the time I reached my 40s, I began to observe my body more carefully. A man who pays attention to small patterns often discovers truths long before science puts them into textbooks. I noticed that digestion did not respond the same way to every meal. Some meals left me light, steady, and energetic. Others made my stomach feel like a furnace burning slowly through the night. The difference, more often than not, was the amount of saturated fat on the plate. When a meal is heavy with butter, fatty meats, cream sauces, or fried foods, the digestive system faces a more demanding task. Fat is the most energy-dense nutrient we eat, and saturated fats in particular require a slower and more complex digestive process. The stomach does not rush these meals along. Instead, it holds them longer. This delay is called slower gastric emptying. In simple terms, the stomach becomes cautious. It releases food into the small intestine gradually because fats take more work to break down. The body must prepare additional digestive resources before allowing that food to move forward. One of those resources is bile. Bile is produced in the liver and stored in the gallbladder. Its role is to emulsify fats, breaking large fat droplets into smaller ones so enzymes can act on them. When a meal contains a significant amount of saturated fat, the gallbladder contracts and releases more bile to assist digestion. For a healthy person, this process is normal. But when meals are consistently high in saturated fats, the digestive system must repeatedly perform this demanding process. The stomach slows, bile secretion increases, and the body devotes significant energy to processing the meal. The result is something many people recognize but rarely understand. That heavy, lingering feeling after eating. Food remains in the stomach longer. Pressure builds within the abdomen. For some individuals, the lower esophageal sphincter, the small muscular valve between the stomach and the esophagus, relaxes slightly under this pressure. When that happens, stomach acid can move upward. That sensation is commonly known as acid reflux. I remember clearly when I began noticing it. After large, fatty dinners, a burning feeling would climb slowly behind my chest. It was not dramatic. It was subtle. but it was persistent enough to make sleep uncomfortable. Years later, I would learn that high-fat meals are known to promote this very effect. They slow stomach emptying and increase the chance that stomach contents will move upward. But reflux was only one piece of the puzzle. Another change appeared in the rhythm of digestion itself. The digestive tract moves food forward through gentle muscular contractions called peristalsis. These waves of motion carry nutrients along the intestines where absorption occurs. Diet influences how efficiently these movements happen. Meals extremely high in saturated fats can alter this rhythm. Digestion slows. The intestines move food more gradually. For some people, this results in constipation or a general feeling that digestion has become sluggish. I noticed that when my meals were dominated by fatty meats and heavy sauces, my digestion lost its natural rhythm. My stomach felt full long after it should have emptied, and the rest of the digestive system seemed to move reluctantly. But there is another layer to this story that scientists have studied in more recent decades. Inside our digestive tract lives a vast community of microorganisms known as the gut microbiota. These bacteria are not enemies. Many of them are essential partners in digestion, nutrient metabolism, and even immune regulation. What we eat influences which bacteria thrive. Dietary patterns high in saturated fats have been associated with changes in the composition of these microbial communities. Certain bacterial populations may increase, while others that support intestinal balance may decline. When this balance shifts, inflammation within the digestive tract can increase slightly. This does not mean immediate disease, but it can contribute to subtle digestive discomforts, bloating, gas, irregular bowel movements. In my younger years, no one spoke about microbiota. The word itself was unknown to most of us, yet the effects were still present. I remember evenings when my stomach felt swollen after rich meals, as if digestion had become inefficient. Later, when I adopted simpler meals, vegetables, grains, fruits, and lighter sources of fat, the difference was noticeable. Digestion felt calmer. The stomach emptied more easily. The body no longer carried that lingering heaviness. None of this means that saturated fats are poison. That would be an exaggeration. The truth is simpler. The digestive system is capable of handling fats, including saturated fats, in reasonable amounts. But when they dominate the meal, when butter, fatty meats, and fried foods appear day after day, the digestive system must repeatedly slow its processes to cope. That slowdown is where many of the problems begin. Think of digestion like a busy highway. When traffic is moderate, cars flow smoothly. But when too many heavy trucks crowd the road at once, everything moves more slowly. Saturated fats, especially in large quantities, are those heavy trucks. The stomach must pause. The liver must produce bile. The pancreas must release lipase enzymes to break the fats apart. The intestines must carefully absorb the products of that digestion. Every step requires time, and when this happens meal after meal, the digestive system begins to show signs of strain. This strain does not appear overnight. It appears quietly, in small signals: fullness that lasts too long, mild reflux, bloating, slower bowel movements. Many people assume these sensations are normal. They assume aging is the cause, but often the explanation is far simpler. The digestive system is reacting to the composition of the meal. When I began reducing heavy saturated fats, replacing some of them with plant-based foods rich in fiber, something remarkable happened. Digestion became lighter. Meals moved through the stomach more efficiently. The uncomfortable pressure after eating became rare. Even my energy during the afternoon improved. because the body was no longer dedicating so much effort to processing heavy foods. Fiber also played an important role. Plant foods bring structure to digestion. They feed beneficial gut bacteria and support smoother intestinal movement. When fiber and moderate fats share the plate, digestion tends to operate in a more balanced rhythm. That is a lesson I wish I had understood much earlier in life, not because saturated fats are evil, but because the digestive system works best when no single component overwhelms the meal. Excessive saturated fat forces the body to slow down, to produce more bile, to extend the digestive process, and sometimes to trigger uncomfortable symptoms. And over the course of a long life, I have learned that the body rewards simplicity. Meals that are balanced, moderate, and easier to digest allow the digestive system to do its work quietly without strain, without discomfort, and without the heavy burden that too much saturated fat can bring. By the time I reached my 60s, I had already begun to understand something important about digestion. The body is not merely reacting to what we eat today, it is responding to pattern habits repeated over years and decades. A single heavy meal will not destroy a man's digestion, but when certain foods dominate the diet for many years, the digestive system slowly adapts, and sometimes not in the most comfortable way. Saturated fats were one of the patterns I eventually examined more carefully. In my younger years, rich foods were symbols of prosperity. Butter, fatty cuts of beef, thick gravies, and fried dishes were common at the dinner table. They were satisfying, filling, and deeply traditional. No one spoke much about how these foods affected the digestive system. We simply assumed that discomfort after a heavy meal was the price of enjoying it. But the body does not work on tradition. It works on biology. When a meal contains a large quantity of saturated fats, the digestive system initiates several coordinated processes. The stomach slows its emptying to give the small intestine time to prepare for fat digestion. The gallbladder releases bile salts that emulsify fats into smaller droplets. The pancreas secretes enzymes, particularly pancreatic lipase, that break those droplets into fatty acids and glycerol. These steps are efficient, but they are not fast. Compared with carbohydrates or many plant foods, fats require more time and more biochemical support to digest. This is one reason high-fat meals often sit in the stomach longer. The digestive tract is essentially pacing itself, ensuring that the incoming fat can be properly processed. Over time, I noticed that this prolonged digestion created a subtle chain reaction in the body. First came fullness, not the comfortable fullness of a nourishing meal, but the heavy fullness that lingers longer than expected. The stomach feels stretched, breathing feels slightly tighter. Instead of feeling energized after eating, the body becomes sluggish. Many people describe this sensation as food sitting in the stomach. In reality, that description is not far from the truth. When gastric emptying slows, food does remain in the stomach longer. The digestive system is deliberately delaying its passage into the small intestine because fat digestion must proceed gradually. Then comes another common signal: bloating. Part of this discomfort can occur when digestion becomes inefficient. If food moves too slowly through the digestive tract, fermentation by intestinal bacteria may increase. Gas accumulates, the abdomen expands slightly, and the body sends a clear message that digestion is under strain. For some individuals, this is accompanied by reflux. As the stomach remains full for extended periods, internal pressure increases. The small muscular valve that normally prevents stomach acid from traveling upward, the lower esophageal sphincter, may occasionally relax. When that happens, Acid rises toward the esophagus and creates the burning sensation many people recognize. I experienced this myself during periods when my meals were consistently rich in saturated fats. It was not constant, but it appeared frequently enough to make me curious about its cause. Later in life, physicians explained the connection clearly. High-fat meals are known to delay stomach emptying and increase the likelihood of reflux in susceptible individuals. The body simply cannot move those meals through the digestive tract as quickly. But digestion is not only about mechanical processes like stomach emptying and enzyme release. Another important player is the gut microbiota, the immense ecosystem of bacteria that inhabit our intestines. This community is sensitive to diet. Foods rich in fiber from vegetables, fruits, legumes, and whole grains tend to support bacterial populations that produce beneficial compounds such as short-chain fatty acids. These compounds help maintain the health of the intestinal lining and support balanced digestion. However, diets consistently high in saturated fats and low in fiber can alter this microbial balance. Certain bacteria that thrive in high-fat environments may increase, while those associated with digestive stability may decline. Researchers have observed that such changes can contribute to low-grade inflammation within the digestive tract. Again, this does not mean immediate illness, but it may contribute to the mild but persistent symptoms. Many people experience bloating, irregular digestion, or abdominal discomfort. Looking back across my life, I can see how these small changes accumulated over time. In my 30s and 40s, I ignored digestive discomfort because I was busy with work and family. By my 50s, the signals were clearer. By my 60s, I realized that if I wanted to preserve comfort in my later years, my eating habits needed adjustment. That adjustment was not dramatic. I did not eliminate every food that contained saturated fat. Life would become unnecessarily restrictive if we tried to remove every trace of it. Instead, I changed the balance of my meals. Fatty meats became occasional rather than daily foods. Butter was used sparingly rather than generously. Fried foods, once common at the table, became rare. At the same time, I increased foods that supported easier digestion: vegetables, beans, whole grains, and fruits rich in natural fiber. The results appeared gradually but unmistakably. My stomach felt lighter after meals. The bloating that once followed heavy dinners became uncommon. Reflux episodes nearly disappeared. Digestion moved with a steadier rhythm, and I slept more comfortably at night because my stomach was no longer struggling to process large quantities of fat. Perhaps the most surprising change was energy. When digestion demands less effort, the body has more resources available for everything else. Instead of feeling drowsy after meals, I remained alert and active through the afternoon. This is something many people overlook. Digestion is an energy-intensive process. When meals are extremely heavy, especially high in saturated fats, the body diverts significant energy toward processing them. The result can be fatigue or sluggishness after eating. By choosing meals that were easier to digest, I allowed my body to distribute its energy more efficiently. Over the decades that followed, this approach became a quiet habit rather than a strict rule. When special occasions arrived, I enjoyed traditional foods without guilt. But in everyday life, I allowed moderation to guide my choices. That moderation protected my digestion far more effectively than any temporary diet ever could. Now, at 100 years old, my digestive system is not perfect. No system remains perfect after a century of use, but it works reliably. Meals do not bring discomfort. The stomach performs its work calmly without protest. And if there is one lesson my long life has taught me about saturated fats and digestion, it is this. The body does not rebel against occasional indulgence. It rebels against excess that becomes routine. When saturated fats dominate the diet, digestion slows, the stomach labors, and discomfort becomes common. But when those fats are kept in reasonable proportion, balanced with fiber-rich foods and lighter meals, the digestive system can perform its work smoothly for many years. And that quiet, comfortable digestion is one of the most underrated forms of health a person can enjoy. At 100 years old, I no longer chase complicated health theories. I have watched too many trends appear and disappear over the decades. What remains reliable are the quiet lessons the body teaches through experience. Digestion is one of those lessons. When the digestive system works well, most people barely notice it. Meals are eaten, nutrients are absorbed, and the body continues its work without discomfort. But when digestion struggles, every meal becomes a reminder that something is out of balance. Throughout my life, I learned that excessive saturated fats often placed that balance under pressure. Heavy meals rich in butter, fatty meats, and fried foods slowed the rhythm of digestion. The stomach held food longer. Bile production increased to manage the fats. The intestines worked harder to process what arrived. Over time, that strain could show itself as bloating, reflux, sluggish digestion, or a persistent heaviness after eating. None of these signals appeared immediately, and none meant that fats were forbidden. The digestive system is capable of handling many foods when they are eaten in reasonable amounts, but excess has consequences. When saturated fats dominate the plate day after day, digestion must repeatedly slow down to manage the workload. The stomach becomes overburdened, the digestive process stretches longer, and discomfort becomes more likely. The lesson I eventually embraced was not elimination but balance. Meals built around vegetables, whole grains, fruits, and moderate amounts of fat allowed digestion to move naturally. Fiber supported the movement of food through the intestines. The stomach emptied more comfortably. The body felt lighter after eating. These are small changes, but small changes repeated for decades shape the condition of the body. And if a man wishes to reach 100 years with a digestive system that still works quietly and faithfully, he must learn a simple principle. Feed the body in a way that allows digestion to work with ease and not struggle under excess.